All right, so you kind of kicked that off of being one of 9, but talk a bit about where you grew up, who were some of your early influences, and what ultimately guided you to the Naval Academy and your subsequent 5 decades of service.
Yeah, great question. So, I'm really grateful for the post 9/11 generation, but my journey in the military was, I'm from a family of 9. My dad's deal was you can go anywhere you want, but you got to pay half. So my journey with the Naval Academy and the Navy was really out of a need for free education. It grew, my passion for service grew over time, but I didn't, like a lot of people post 9/11, I give a lot of credit. I call them the greatest generation because they raised their hands when they knew what they were getting into. I wasn't smart enough to get directly into the Naval Academy. I had to go to the Naval Academy prep school, which is probably the lowest form of life. I mean, we got a grad right here, but anyways, that's how I ended up in the Navy. And I'm struggling now because I'm out, because I would have stayed in as long as I could, because I had what would be called purpose and professional alignment for 38 years. So I will say up front, I talked to the mayor. My dad was a politician. My brothers and sisters, they basically kid my dad. They said he had 9 kids because he needed he needed a force to deliver flyers and to door knock. But yeah, that was my. I flew on my first airplane when I joined the Navy. So with a family of 9. I didn't grow up poor, but I really feel like I've seen the world. So yeah, that was the genesis of my journey, was education, and then fell in love with the people, the passion, and the purpose of mission.
Now, awful lot of things to do in the Navy. Why the SEAL teams?
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting because I never turn a kid, a man or woman down, a young woman, about being a SEAL. I was really focused on the physicality of it. I love the challenge of doing something physical that maybe not everybody could do. I will tell you though that, and I like the culture, and I met 2 enlisted SEALs in Newport, Rhode Island, and I thought, okay, they jump out of airplanes, they shoot guns, they blow things up. I liked the physicality, but I can tell you in hindsight, I don't think I really realized until I had to lead people in combat, the real mission of, the real bottom line of being a Navy SEAL. And I'm really careful with young men and women that want to be a SEAL, that I at least educate them on the reality of going to war and losing brothers and sisters. And that's something that's heavy, but I think it's something that a lot of guys and gals are attracted to the physicality, but there's a cost to it. It's not a nice business. So how did you think about technology early in your career, if at all, and particularly software, and how did your thinking evolve with the progress in technology, the changing nature of warfare, and your own ascent as a leader? Yeah, so I wouldn't call myself an innovator. I wouldn't call myself a technologist, but I know what I am and I know what I'm not. And I think part of leadership is making sure you have good people around you. I think in the military, I mean, we are basically charged with fighting and winning our nation's wars, and I don't say that humorously. And I think technology and innovation, you either adapt, evolve, or go away. And I've seen that on the battlefield, and I imagine most of you have experienced that in business. So I've always tried to create a culture of intellectually curious people, risk takers. I call it calculated risk takers. There's a term I use, calculated crazy. It kind of sounds a little bad, but how do you cultivate people to take risk so that you can adapt? I can tell you I probably didn't think about technology or software early on in my career. Desert Storm was probably the first time. GPS was new back then, and we used to use maps and compasses, and we won the war in Iraq, I think because of GPS and precision strike, but we started to use pluggers, handheld pluggers, to do navigation on the water and navigation over land. So, technology can be, it could be as simple as a guy who tinkers with his gear. That's innovation. It's not always this big, great idea or great piece of kit. Innovators are always trying to improve their fighting position, I think, in either business or in warfare. And I've always tried to encourage failure. And I've tried to cultivate people that are intellectually curious, is about as much as I could say.
So you spent an awful lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan from the beginnings of that conflict in the early 2000s, and then throughout. How did our tactics and strategies evolve over the course of that conflict, and how did technology inform and shape that evolution? Yeah,
great. Sean, he didn't know that I was, I'm a preparation guy. He gave me the questions like about 5 minutes before I came in, but I was like, but you'd think I'd be able to. Well, but I thought, go ahead.
I'm not a preparation guy, so I figured, hey, 5 minutes before is pretty good.
But hopefully this makes sense. We were in a counterinsurgency war, mostly in Afghanistan and Iraq, and this will sound really basic, but the way we trained as SEALs and special operators back in the day is we focused on the target. Everything we did was tactics, techniques, and procedures on the target. But in a human fight, in a counterinsurgency, it's all about, the big part of it is find and fix. How do you find and fix the enemy? So find, fix, and then finish, and I don't say that humorously either, but then exploit and analyze. So technology, I think what we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan, at least on the part of the mission where there were irreconcilable elements in Iraq and Afghanistan that we just had to get rid of to try to build, institution in Iraq and Afghanistan. We can get into the policy, but we got into things like signals intelligence and cell phones and collecting data off the X, exploiting computers, which was really the real value proposition in, it's easier to do the finish, it's harder to do the find and fix. And if you know anything about the bin Laden raid, that took years and years and years to try to find him. And so I think technology really helped with cell phones. How do we exploit cell phones, and then how do we exploit and analyze data so that we can stay ahead of the enemy. So that's just a fundamental way, I think, where we just exploited information with a lot of really smart people that aren't X people, that weren't doing the finish piece.
So, we now live in a world of seemingly omnipresent acute conflict across the globe, and, the events of today are yet another reminder of that. Israel in the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, China in the Pacific. So as a leader and a military strategist, how do you think about the greatest challenges we face as a nation, and what are the must-dos for us, including, of course, technological capabilities?
Yeah, I think I'm a positive person, but, we're struggling right now to, what I would say, compete, sustain, and modernize. I think it was Bob Gates that said the U.S. has been perfect since Vietnam in predicting when and where we would be in conflict. We've never got it right. So, we have strategies. We have the National Defense Strategy that keeps trying to get us to go to China. And we keep getting pulled back in. I mean, you guys are following, you think about the significance of the Israeli hit on Nasrallah. The guy's been around for 32 years. He's not only a military, political, spiritual leader. I mean, we're in a very tenuous time, in my opinion. It's a tinderbox in the Middle East. So I think we're struggling to compete, sustain, and modernize. And I think there's a few things that I would say are challenging. I would call it the bromance of autocracies. And what I'm talking about is North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China. I mean, there is a little bit of a Cold War brewing here where you've got like-minded Western countries and you've got a bromance of realpolitik with those actors, and that's troublesome. The defense industrial base, which you all have a lot of say in that, I didn't realize a Javelin missile, 200 chips. I didn't really understand rare earth elements. I didn't understand the long ball, patient and persistent piece of the Chinese. And we tend to be, and I say this about myself, we're a little bit ADD when it comes to our national security strategy. So I'm a big proponent of we need an all hands on deck with we need a national security strategy, not a national defense strategy. We need to use all elements of national power. Our recruiting's down. We've got political divide. We're operating under a continuing resolution. For you all, those are things that when you have a CR, it kind of hinders innovation because it just keeps the lights on, but it doesn't allow for research and development. So those are some big concerns but I have faith because I think the thing I worry about America, and just in my reflection in history, we are great as a country when we get punched in the face. Okay, but we're not real good at a long ball, patient, persistent. When I think of 9/11, can't think of how proud I am as an American how we rallied. Maybe Pearl Harbor, but if you think about the Chinese, and I'm learning a little bit more now that I'm out of uniform, but the economic long ball of the Chinese is what I think we need to kind of take a hard look at. And so that was a little bit of a long answer, but that's kind of where I'm thinking. But I'm intellectually curious about not just the military piece of DIME, but the diplomacy, the information piece that Primer certainly has a key part of, and the economic piece.
As conflict escalates, actually as we speak in the Middle East, what are some key things to keep in mind for all of us, in this room and beyond, as this unfolds? First, second, third order consequences with respect to the geopolitical risk, potential for further escalation. How do you think about these things as you're now, to a certain extent, on the outside and watching probably and consuming much of the same information, as we are?
Yeah, that's there's always the fear of, World War III is such a broad term, but we're at war right now with Iran. We can say we're not, but we are. And we're probably indirectly with war with Russia. It just depends on how you look at warfare. Are we on the ground in Ukraine? No, but are we doing everything in our effort to enable the Ukrainians? And I would say, we are, the Middle East we call it the axis of evil or the axis of anger with, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and then what are called the Iraqi aligned militia groups. I just fear we're overextended, and we're worried about our debt. I worry about the son a question my son asked me that I had trouble articulating. He goes, "Dad, why does Ukraine and Taiwan matter when 60% of the people in the U.S. live paycheck to paycheck?" Probably not in this room, but I have 4 kids, and it's the question of, I try to talk about 10% of the world's GDP comes out of Taiwan. I think 1% of Russia. You try to trace it back. The free flow of commerce, democracies, so what am I worried about? I think we're overextended, and I think the border's probably one. You can understand why Putin cares about his near abroad. I think we probably overlook our near abroad, which is, Central and South America and, the Caribbean, if you follow what the Chinese are doing in Central South America and even in the Caribbean. So I'm all over the place. I'm not giving you I think we'll rally. I would like more middle ground politically. And I'm out of uniform, so I'm not going to. I think our political divide hurts us a lot, and I think that's a weakness that we need to kind of work at. That was all over the place, sorry.
No, look, we're all over the globe, and this is a multi-factor problem, and we seem to be, adding more to the problem, right, as opposed to reducing it. I'd love your thoughts, and this is kind of, in some ways, a broad-based technology question, but I want to kind of also get to AI. If you think about the work that's being done by many of the folks that, worked for you over the years, and the tools they have to deal with the challenges you face, particularly when it comes to data, insights, and information. Like, what's the range of perspective on the purpose, use, and value of AI across senior military leaders and across service branches? Is there an emerging consensus?
Yeah, I think it comes back to me. I think you always need a human in the loop. That may be the master of the obvious, but we use the term observe, orient, decide, and act. So I think technology and the things that Primer's doing, or even the things that Virtualytics is doing, I think AI and autonomy are probably a revolution in military affairs, and how we assimilate those into our competitive advantage is absolutely imperative. The things that Primer's doing, OSINT, or open source intelligence, is probably the new signals intelligence, if that makes sense. I mean, the ability to, and what Primer's doing for the military is to make sense of messy data, and how do you make sense of data for maintenance? How do you use AI for predictive maintenance? How do you do it for workforce, for readiness? So I think, and then how do you? I think AI and autonomy is it's how do you use it to protect the force and enhance the mission? So if you look at, just to give a vignette, we're using Standard missiles off of a couple $100 million destroyer to shoot down drones. I mean, so mass attritability, I compare it to a Bic razor. We've got to produce drones and less. I mean, Ukraine is a great example of, I guess it's a little bit of a dichotomy. They're using drones really well, but when it comes down to it, it's almost like a World War I scenario where they're moving about 6 to 12 inches a day because it's a ground campaign. But I think AI for speed of decision making for analyst operators and leaders is good, and I think AI and autonomy will help us protect the force and use drones as an effective way to conduct warfare.
Do you think the urgency of this, I'm reflecting on your remarks where you said, hey, look, we do pretty well after we've been punched in the face. We're not so good at avoiding getting punched in the face, right? And we see, the potential brewing for a while, but we don't seem to organize ourselves until after we at least take the initial blow. Do you think the urgency of the present situation will result in faster adoption of emerging technology? Because I think the private sector now is more engaged than any time, certainly in my professional career and probably, my lifetime, in bringing new innovation to bear. But bringing that getting the capability quickly in the hands of the users doesn't seem to be a whole heck of a lot easier, with the exception of there's a handful of success stories out there, but it takes an awfully long time. Do you think that? How do you think about the blockers, the opportunities, and then given 4 decades of experience, do you think we're going to get better in a time horizon that matters, that allows us to be focused much more on prevention?
Yeah, that's another great question. I'm on the other side now, and I'll just give you I work for Sean, which I'm really proud. I took a job with a burgeoning drone company that got bought by a private equity firm, and there's an insatiable sense of urgency from the private equity side to to turn a profit. And there's somewhat of a monopoly of our big defense contractors. So that valley of death thing, where there's an impatience with people that invest money in what I think is a creative genius of our country. Companies that are living off of Red Bull and ramen. Really creative companies. I think we're making progress with things like Replicator and Defense Innovation Unit, and Caltech. I didn't realize I have a lot of Caltech guys that work for the company that I'm working for. I don't think it's moving quick enough. I think our acquisition system is, and I'm not that great with, but it was McNamara. Think about how long ago that was. It's a big aircraft carrier type of. It takes too long to compete at speed. If you look at the Ukrainians, they're changing their software every 2 weeks because they have to survive. So I do believe, like Secretary Hicks, I think Congress wants us to move quicker, but you probably have some private equity people out here. Money, it's the bottom line, and if it takes too long, then they move on. So my bottom line is I think we need to move quicker. And we've got to somehow, we somehow have got to compete at speed, and that takes authorities, it takes creativity, it takes partnership, but I don't think it's moving as quick as it should, is my bottom line. But that's what, as citizen soldiers, you can advocate to Congress. I think the most important political position in the U.S. is the individual voter. And when my kids talk about, they yap, or my son-in-law, who I love, I go, do you vote? Are you involved? Do you advocate your opinion? So I think I would encourage you to get Congress. We need more authorities to adapt quicker.
All right, so it's our job to fix Congress. Thank you for that wonderful assignment. I'm sure everybody in this room is very sanguine about our ability to do this, but I certainly, it is a participatory democracy, and at a certain point, you either get what you demand or you get what you tolerate. So appreciate that. All right, so you're less than 1 year into a well-earned retirement from the military and less than 1 year into your newer career. You talked a little bit about what you're up to. What are you most excited about? How are you spending your time? And what's the biggest change you've had to adjust to?
Yeah, I told you I miss it. I do miss it. I'm trying to find, I like working with good people, and I met Sean through my buddy Clay Hotmacher. Frankly, I'm trying to pay my wife back. Because she let me stay in for she let me stay in for 38 years, and I laugh about it, but there's a downside to being a father and being away a lot. I raised my right hand. My wife said yes, but my kids have, they got born into it. So what am I trying to do? I'm really, really trying to. My wife wants to come out here to California because I love California. My kids are here, my grandkids are here. People are like, why would you want to live in California? Why wouldn't you want to live in California, as far as I'm concerned? So that's probably not that inspirational, but I got a great bride who let me stay in 3 times. People make decisions around the dinner table, and we had some struggles with raising kids, and I'm like, hey, I love this. I went to Afghanistan for a year, I went to Bahrain, I went to Iraq, and I loved it. But my wife had to carry the rucksack at home, which was hard. So I'm really, really trying to work for 3 or 4 years and work with people like Sean, and because I'm finding good people, but I probably get emotional because I miss it. But there are good people in industry that are just as much committed to national defense as I was in uniform. So I appreciate that. So that's kind of my goal right now, is to pay my friggin' wife back. Because she says, I'll tell you this, she says she never said it, but we have this ethos in the SEAL community: be someone special. She goes, you're not someone special, you're someone stupid. You stayed in for a $200 pay raise every year. And I'm more stupid for marrying you. No, she says that, but no, but anyways, I'm good.
All right, thank you, Colin. So last one. What gives you the most concern about the state of the world today, having ticked through a bunch of factors, and what gives you the most hope?
Yeah, and I told you I flew on my first airplane when I joined the Navy, and I really feel like I've seen the world now, all the good and bad of the world, and with all of our warts, what gives me hope is this place right here. We can bash on it, but it's got a value proposition that, free speech, free enterprise, and free markets are. We're imperfect, but the hope I have is I've seen a lot of different constructs around the world, and the hope is that we will come together, and I think we will. That gives me hope. Things like our debt, things like overextension probably worry me. My son Henry asking me, why does Ukraine matter to me when I'm struggling? I'm struggling to, somehow we've got to connect that. But I think I'm hopeful because we'll pull it together like we always do, and our value proposition again is pretty damn good compared to the rest of the world. And I want to move to Pasadena.
Collin, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Is that all right?
Outstanding.
Yeah.